for me? What's in it for me? Find out what would cause them to take action. That's identifying their needs. And then fourth of all, present Ambit as the very best choice. All things considered, this is the perfect choice for you based on what you told me you want. People don't argue with their own data. One of the great rules is they argue with you if you tell them it's a good idea. They don't argue with themselves if they've already said, I'm looking for a way to increase my income that has great security and low risk and everything else. They're not going to argue with it. Then number 5 is to answer objections. What about this? What about that? And so on. Number 6 in the strategy is to close the sale. Get them to take action. Ask for them to take action. This used to be a real problem for me because when I got to the point of asking for the order, I'd go into paralysis. My stomach would start to churn, my temples would throb, my hands would sweat, and I'd say, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And I found out later that's what people say when they're terrified of closing it, saying, well, does it sound good to you? Like who said earlier, does this make sense to you? It's a great close. Does it make sense to you? They say yes. Well, then let's get on with it. Let's not waste another minute and close the sale. Anyway, number 7 is getting resales and referrals. It's going back to those people and getting referrals. Get your customers to give you referrals. Every satisfied customer can be a source of endless referrals. They can become a golden chain. And so what that loops you back to the top of the funnel and you start over again. Your referrals become your prospects and you work them through. Well, I heard all this. I was writing this. I couldn't believe it. You mean there's a logical and orderly process to this? Just like developing a computer program? It's a logical and orderly step-by-step process. It's like a recipe. And if you follow the recipe by gum, you get the same dish of the same quality over and over and over again. Your job and my job is to learn the recipe and master the recipe. Now, the interesting thing happens is if you use any series of techniques over and over again, what eventually happens? It takes less time for you to get the same or greater results. That's the number one reason that people are successful is they get better and better and better doing the critical things they need to do, and they get more and more results faster and faster in less time. So in less time, they're actually making more money. So what I learned was the law of cause and effect. Now, this law goes back to Aristotle. It's considered the granddaddy law of Western philosophy. Every other law, whether it's in mathematics or physics or electrical or medicine or chemistry, all falls under this law. And it says that if you can be clear about the effect that you want to double your income, you just trace it back to someone who at one time was earning less than you and who is now earning twice as much as you, and you find out what they did, and you do the same things over and over again. Now, here's an important point. It's one of the biggest challenges we have in the U.S. is because Americans have the attention span of a gnat. Is we learn the formula and we immediately change it before we even master the formula. We want to add a little bit of this and a little bit of that and take out this and do something else. No, no, no. There's a formula here. Learn the formula, master the formula, and only improve on the formula after you've mastered it and demonstrated it. You notice that every single, whether they're a great musician or a carpenter or anybody else, they learn and master the craft before they begin to improve on it. And it's the number one reason for failure is people will not master the basic skills before they make changes. So do exactly what other successful people do. And here's the rule, is if you do what other successful people do over and over again, nothing can stop you from getting the same results. Now here's an important point. When I started off, and this is a great danger for us, when I started off I saw people who were doing better than me. They got better grades, better families, more popular and so on. So I assumed that they were better than me. I found this is one of the greatest challenges we have as human beings. I assumed that they were better than me because they were doing better. And then I took it to the next step, which is if they're better than me, I must be worse than them. And if I'm worse than them, they must be worth more than I am. But if they're worth more than I am, then I must be worth less. And that is the greatest single psychological problem, is we compare ourselves unfavorably to others. And then I found this most incredible thing, is that nobody's better than you, nobody's smarter than you. Nobody's better than you, nobody's smarter than you. Some people who are doing well are complete idiots. They can't find their bum with both hands. And you know, the belief that people who are doing better than you or smarter and better than you cause you to quit. It's like being in a race and being told the other person's twice as fast as you. Why even try? But nobody's smarter than you, nobody's better than you. The people who are earning 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, not a whit of difference between them. It's just that they learned and mastered the critical skills necessary. So remember that, and you can tell other people that. Nobody's better than you, nobody's smarter than you. They've just mastered the skills before you did. And anything that hundreds of thousands and millions of other people have done, you can do as well. If people can start from nowhere and be successful in this business, it's proof that others can do it as well. It's proof that everyone can do it. Are you with me so far? Remember, our biggest enemy is our own doubts and fears, which we bring up to hold us back. So the law of cause and effect says that thoughts are causes and conditions are effects. Thoughts are causes and conditions are effects. Is the conditions of your life are caused by your thoughts. And this is the great conclusion that all the great thinkers have come to. It's the foundation principle of all religion and all metaphysics and all philosophy and all psychology and all success, is that your thoughts create your realities. So the question is, what are you thinking about? And you'll find that people who are successful think success thoughts all the time. We're talking about self-made millionaires. I worked with Bill Danko and Thomas Stanley, who wrote The Millionaire Next Door. They spent 30 years interviewing people who became millionaires. And do you know what the primary thought of these people is? Is financial independence. It's to look at every single financial decision and say, will this help or hurt? And they're very, very sensitive to the use of their money because their primary thought is financial independence. So this brings us to the great conclusion, and the great conclusion, which is the foundation principle of life, is that you become what you think about most of the time. You become what you think about most of the time. So the question is, what do you think about most of the time? Now, this is a universal principle. It's timeless, but there are some exceptions to this. Because if there weren't, every young man would turn into a woman by the age of 20. And alcoholics would turn into, whiskey bottles, and fat people would turn into pizzas. Anyway, so you become what you think about most of the time. So what do you think about most of the time? Well, the University of Pennsylvania was commissioned by several large companies with thousands of people to do a series of studies to see if they couldn't develop the profile of the most successful people. And so what they did is they interviewed, over a 22-year period, they interviewed 350,000 people, entrepreneurs and salespeople like yourself, and they asked them, among other questions, what do you think about most of the time? And then they divided them up by percentiles, bottom percentile all the way up to the top 10 percentile. And you are easily in the top 10% because you're here. One of the things we know is only the top 10% of people in any society will attend a seminar like this, especially on a weekend, to learn how to improve their lives. I mean, it's a very rare thing. And so the fact that you're here means that you are consciously in the top 10%. So you might be interested to know how people in the top 10% think most of the time, wouldn't you? Say yes. Yes. What do you think? What do you think top people think about most of the time? Well, all your answers are correct, but what they came up with was a very simple conclusion, is they think about what they want and how to get it most of the time. They think about what they want and how to get it. What they want and how to get it. So I'm going to give you a go-forward question. This is the question that you're going to use for the rest of your life. It's the question used by all leaders and all top people in every field, and it's the question that will eventually make you rich and successful. It's the question, how? Say how! From now on, when you have a problem, the question is, how do you solve it? If you have a goal that you want to achieve, the question is, how? You've got an obstacle in your way, the question is, how? And that's how top people think. Like the pilot piloting the airplane, they make continual course corrections. They say, how do we get over it, under it, around it, how do we deal with it? That they don't say, I'm going to quit, wah, wah, wah. No, they just say, how? And the wonderful thing is this, is whenever you ask the question how, it's like stepping on the accelerator of your own potential. And what happens is your mind throws off ideas, like those sparks in the cartoons, with the light bulbs. It throws off ideas, and every idea is for an action, and it's an action you can take when? It's an action you can take now. So the question how is the great question. It actually unlocks your potential. It makes you smarter. And the more you ask the question how, the more ideas you come up with and the more solutions. We could do this and we could do that, and more of this and less of that, and so on. You keep asking how. And when you have a question or a problem with regard to double confirming that people are coming to a meeting or so on, say, how do you confirm? How do you make sure everybody's there? And you pick everybody else's brains. You just keep asking how. How is the question of the powerful person. When you ask the question how, it means you're taking charge of your life, taking charge of your future. And it's so important because it unlocks your creative genius, which leads us to how is it that top people think most of the time. Well, again, in many of the studies, we found that the top people think in a specific way in different areas of life, which is why their lives are so much better. And we're now talking about the top 10%. People who want to be happy, healthy, thin, rich, popular, and everything else. Is that pretty consistent? Of course. Actually, according to the studies, there's